For thousands of years, humans have dreamed of soaring through the skies and exploring the cosmos. But what if I told you that flying machines were not just a modern invention and might have existed in ancient times? Would you believe it? From ancient legends, we hear of the flying carpet of the Middle East, the mysterious Wheel of Ezekiel, Solomon's shuttle, and the legendary Vimana described in the sacred texts of India and China. Are these merely myths, or could they be remnants of a forgotten, advanced technology? Today, a multitude of artifacts and pieces of evidence have led archaeologists and enthusiasts of ancient mysteries to ask, could the enigmatic civilizations of the past have been humanity's very first space engineers? And if so, how advanced were these machines? Join us as we explore the unsolved mysteries of ancient spacecraft in today's video. Vimana. Legends and mythical stories will gradually be weathered by the dust of time. Yet those tales that are impressive enough only fade slightly, never truly disappearing in the flow of history. The vast Indian civilization, the most profound on the planet, has indeed left humanity in awe. And according to its history, their sacred ancient scriptures, called the Vedas, mention astonishing spacecraft, one of the machines that allowed ancient people to travel anywhere in the world, even from one planet to another, was the magical vehicle known as the Vimana. In ancient Indian history, there is an old text named the Vedas that speaks of strange airships that came to our planet some 6,000 years ago, while many people still doubt the existence of the Vimana. There are also millions around the world who believe that thousands of years ago, spaceships controlled by the gods visited ancient humanity. In Hindu belief, the gods used the Vimana spacecraft to travel between the sky and the earth. That is why the Vimana is also poetically called the chariot of the gods. With the help of the Vimana crafts, ancient astronauts are said to have visited different places on our planet, spreading knowledge and enabling primitive civilizations to achieve unprecedented advances, even surpassing the imagination of modern humans. Not only is the existence of this ancient spacecraft mentioned in the Vedas, but it also appears in the Mahabharata, the great epic that encapsulates the entire Indian civilization. According to the text, one passage describes, at Rama's command, a god in Indian history, the magnificent chariot instantly soared from the mountaintop up into the clouds with a thunderous sound. In another section, it is written that the Vimana, the spacecraft of another god, not only flew, but also emitted a dazzling light like the sun and a sound like a mighty thunderclap. If these were merely legends, it would be hard to explain why the Vimana Shastra, an ancient scientific text on flying machines, also refers to them. According to this scripture, the Vimana was a flying device capable of moving without any external energy supply, traveling from place to place, even from one world to another. Moreover, the Vimana in this text is described with details that are even more astonishing. Dr. Rockhaven, after studying many ancient manuscripts, pointed out that the Vimana was described as having 31 components of a flying machine, including an illustration of the craft as seen from below. In addition, the text listed 16 types of metals necessary to construct this vehicle, but only 3 are known to modern science. The rest remain unidentified. Chris Nerdy, an aeronautics professor at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, agreed with Brahava's interpretation and affirmed that this was entirely true. Krishnamurti also studied the ancient Vedas and other Sanskrit texts to investigate the subjects of aeronautics, spacecraft, airplanes, and ancient astronauts. From this, he declared, researching these Sanskrit manuscripts has convinced me that the ancient Indians truly knew the secrets of building spacecraft and flying devices described in ways that resemble ships from another world. However, the question that continues to puzzle modern scientists is not whether the Vimana truly existed, but rather what kind of energy could it have used to operate if it really did exist in the past. The flying craft is described as being quite massive in appearance. According to another ancient Sanskrit manuscript discovered in the early 20th century, the Vimana was said to be an advanced aerodynamic flying device, resembling a rocket capable of traveling between planets and created by extraterrestrials. Another document revealed by the JIS in 1952 claimed that the propulsion system of the Vimana was based on mercury vortex engines, a concept somewhat similar to engines powered by electrical energy. Yet, many believe that the ancient Vimana actually harnessed an even stronger, more accessible, and completely free source of electricity. 556. Can you guess where this abundant energy came from? It sounds insane, but one theory suggests that the giant pyramids on the Giza Plateau were in fact free charging stations, providing energy for the Vimanas. The universe is indeed filled with mysteries. Remarkably, just a few years ago, Chinese researchers discovered ancient Sanskrit manuscripts thousands of years old in Lhasa, Tibet. These documents were sent to the University of Chengdu for translation, and the results shocked the scientific community. According to Dr. Ruth Rayna, the translated texts were believed to be blueprints of a spacecraft capable of interstellar travel. The manuscripts explained that the energy system of these space vehicles was designed based on anti-gravity technology, a system rooted in something akin to Lajima, a mystical power said to exist within the human self, strong enough to overcome all forces of gravity. The fascinating point is that Lajima, in Hindu belief, is the power that allows a person to soar freely into the sky. Dr. Rayna explained that with the machines known as Vimanas, humans could travel to any planet. However, the manuscripts do not mention any specific methods of interplanetary travel or communication. The only exception described is a journey from Earth to the Moon. Yet, even today, researchers are still unsure whether this was an actual voyage that took place or merely a planned mission. If such a journey truly occurred, the history of space exploration as we know it today would be forever changed. Indian scientists have made great efforts to collect and preserve as many details of these ancient texts as possible for continued research. However, this has become increasingly difficult, as China announced that certain parts of the manuscripts would be kept separately to serve their own space program studies. Moreover, in another great Indian epic called the Ramayana, there is a remarkably detailed story of a lunar expedition using a Vimana and a battle on the moon involving the Atlantean spacecraft. Could all of this really be nothing more than coincidence? What once seemed impossible began to appear less so when astonishing archaeological evidence was discovered. In the famous Teos Cave in Ecuador, a model of a modern airplane was unearthed, dated to between 6,000 and 12,000 years ago. Yes, you heard that correctly, a modern-looking aircraft. But from the age of ancient civilizations, Dr. Arthur Percy of the New York Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics examined and tested the model from its wings and cockpit to its windshield, and was utterly astonished to find that its structure closely resembled that of a modern bomber plane. The question arises, can we actually recreate and apply those ancient yet advanced technologies in the modern era? Nothing is impossible. Another fascinating detail found in the ancient Sanskrit text Samarangana Sutradhara describes that the body of a Vimana had to be built like a great bird, using lightweight materials. Powerful and durable are the two most accurate words to describe it. Inside, a mercury engine was to be placed with an iron heating device underneath. The hidden power of mercury would generate vortices to propel the craft, allowing a man seated inside to travel vast distances across the sky. The movements of the Vimana included vertical ascents and descents, as well as tilting forward and backward. With such a craft, humans could soar through the heavens, while celestial beings could descend to Earth whenever they wished. Thus, in these descriptions, the Vimana was not only capable of flying like a helicopter, but also of offensive and defensive combat maneuvers. In the Hakatha law code of the Babylonians, it is clearly written, flying in a Vimana is a privilege and a wonder. The knowledge of flight is one of our most ancient inheritances, a gift from the gods. We received it from them as a means to save many lives. These accounts suggest that the gods were saviors who brought forth advanced technologies. Yet, if the gods' theory is not correct, then perhaps ancient humans received Vimanas from other powers beyond Earth. Could it be that these otherworldly forces were the true gods in the consciousness of our ancestors? Furthermore, Professor Zilla shared his studies on the epics, noting that the Pushpaka Vimana was a massive aerial craft the size of a large city, with the capacity to carry unlimited numbers of people. 3 flying cities, known as Vimanas, were said to have been created and used by primeval demons. One city remained in a fixed orbit in the sky, another moved freely across the heavens, and the third stayed permanently stationed on Earth. They were docked much like modern spacecraft at specific latitudes and longitudes. The arrow of Shiva was described unmistakably as a blazing rocket launched from one of those celestial stations. Above all, these accounts seem like glimpses of a once great civilization that was destroyed in ancient wars. If the ancient Vimanas were indeed beyond human scale, then what purpose did the powers who created them truly have? Were they designed to tap into the natural energy of our planet? What if, thousands of years ago, those ancient flying machines used Earth's natural forces as their power source? In fact, could it be that ancient monuments like the pyramids were actually transmitting enormous amounts of energy to fuel the ancient Vimanas? Interestingly, certain types of stones, like ancient paving stones unearthed in excavations, have been found capable of holding and even storing electric charge. What if there were specific locations on Earth deliberately arranged to create what we now call magnetic vortices or electric fields? Perhaps there is an even greater mystery behind the countless ancient Indian megaliths, the giant stone slabs, carved statues, stone pillars, tall towers, and countless other ancient monuments made of stone. Could it be that all these structures, not only from ancient India but across the entire world, were not created without reason? They may have been designed for a very specific scientific purpose, to transmit or channel massive amounts of energy. Many researchers believe that the sophisticated stonework of the Incas, Egyptians, East Indians, the Maya, and other ancient civilizations was not merely for aesthetic purposes, but served some other, as yet unknown function. The clearest evidence for this hypothesis, they say, is the Great Pyramid an ancient energy generator. In other words, it may have been a Tesla-like power plant built thousands of years ago. The pyramid's colossal structure was designed to harness the natural properties of the Earth to produce huge amounts of energy. This energy, according to the theory, was used by the Egyptians and other ancient peoples across the world thousands of years ago. Yet, this theory is still rejected by the majority of mainstream researchers. Many scholars argue that the complex stonework attributed to the Incas, Egyptians, East Indians, the Maya, and other ancient civilizations was indeed built for specific purposes, but not necessarily as power plants. Even so, there are those who believe that the Vimana was, in fact, another form of an unidentified flying object, and that extraterrestrials have been visiting our civilization for thousands of years. If we approach the history of ancient civilizations from a different perspective, we encounter cultures across the globe that were, in fact, highly complex and used advanced technologies long before mainstream science reinvented them. And the mysteries of the Vimana once again affirm that modern humanity's understanding of these ancient civilizations remains extremely limited. Advanced knowledge of geology, physics, electrochemistry, and even astronomy not only existed but was widely applied thousands of years ago, yet the enigma of the Vimana remains unresolved, as no modern researcher has been able to fully explain it. It was not until early 2015 that a report presented by Captain Anand Bodis and Amiya during a discussion titled Ancient Science Through Sanskrit at the prestigious Indian Science Congress sparked a wave of fierce controversy. The report asserted that advanced aeronautics and space travel had already been developed by ancient Indians, with the evidence drawn directly from Vedic scriptures. Captain Bodis even claimed that the ancient Indians were the true forefathers of the modern airplane. Yet, these advanced technologies were eventually lost over time, buried under the ebb and flow of history. Despite facing significant opposition, many still argue that carefully studying ancient texts is worthwhile, for knowledge always continues to evolve. And if humanity truly wishes to uncover the truth, there is no choice but to race against time to bring these mysteries into the light before they are lost. Forever, the Wheel of Ezekiel and the stories of flying palaces called Vimanas may not be enough to convince the majority about the existence of real spacecraft in the distant past. But if the ancient Vedas of Indian civilization mention the Vimana, then the story of Ezekiel's wheel is perhaps one of the most fascinating accounts in the Bible, especially when we view it through the lens of modern technology. And just like the Vimana, Ezekiel's wheel is often regarded as one of the mysterious ancient spacecraft that modern humanity longs to decode. Did Ezekiel's wheel truly exist in this world? Or was it simply one of the allegorical tales in the Bible meant to teach moral lessons to future generations? The truth remains uncertain, but an old African American spiritual has long been passed down, singing of how Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. The little wheel runs by faith, and the big wheel runs by the grace of God. Ezekiel saw the wheel in the middle of the air. When we begin to examine ancient legends and texts about things that seem impossible to have existed on this planet, two basic viewpoints usually emerge. First, many argue that the astonishing achievements and technologies far beyond the time of our ancestors must have been made possible by the intervention of some external force beyond our world. Look, for example, at the majestic pyramids of Egypt with their unsolved mysteries, or the Sangsingdui ruins in China. Are these not the clearest signs of intervention from visitors beyond the earth? In other words, by interpreting ancient history through modern eyes, rather than strictly following orthodox explanations, we begin to see the possibility that our distant ancestors may have been guided, or even uplifted, by an advanced extraterrestrial race. On the other hand, many prefer to explain such accounts strictly in terms of technology. According to this view, the Vimanas, or Ezekiel's wheel, were in fact primitive spacecraft, invented by ancient humans to travel not only across space, but perhaps even through dimensions or time itself. If that were true, then the mysteries of this universe stretch far beyond the imagination of ordinary human thought. Returning to the folk song mentioned earlier, we notice striking parallels with the ancient biblical story. Such a vision, so vividly described, was already recorded with detail and clarity in the book of Ezekiel. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes a vision of the chariot throne of God rushing toward him. This vision has been interpreted in many different ways. To many religious believers, it is simply a holy chariot carrying their Lord. But to numerous proponents of the ancient astronaut theory, it may have been a spacecraft or some kind of shuttle that descended to Earth in the distant past. One of the most famous authors to champion this idea is Erich von Däniken, who provided compelling arguments through his research, offering an alternative explanation of Ezekiel's account and suggesting that what Ezekiel witnessed could have been a space vehicle. In his book, Chariots of the Gods, the Swiss author proposed that this was not a divine chariot, but rather a spacecraft. In fact, von Däniken's theory was so astonishing that it seemed almost impossible to believe, and therefore faced heavy criticism. Yet, the theory proved influential, sparking the interest of Joseph Blumrich, a scientist at NASA. Initially, Blumrich set out to disprove von Däniken's ideas. However, things did not unfold as he expected. The deeper he delved into the subject, the more he found himself persuaded by von Däniken's interpretation. What began as an attempt to debunk ended with Blumrich gradually becoming convinced that Ezekiel's wheel might indeed have been a genuine ancient spacecraft. Eventually, he wrote a book of his own. Through his research, Blumrich came to the conclusion that Ezekiel may have been describing the landing of a space vehicle on Earth, rather than a mere heavenly chariot. Returning to the book of Ezekiel itself, it stands out as one of the earliest works where the narrator directly recounts events from a deeply personal and subjective perspective. In it, Ezekiel described seeing a chariot in the sky descending toward him. The chariot appeared to be controlled by someone who looked like a man. The book states that from the center, it looked like 4 living creatures with the following appearance. Their form resembled humans. Each had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet like the hooves of a calf, shining like polished bronze. All 4 had faces and wings. When they moved, the wings of one touched the wings of the others. Each moved straight forward and did not turn while moving. If these were truly ordinary humans, why did Ezekiel not assert confidently that they were men? What does this mean? The answer is that perhaps they were not human but had human-like forms in nature, making it difficult for an ordinary person to make a definitive identification even upon witnessing them firsthand. Ezekiel's descriptions would evoke in modern humans images reminiscent of extraterrestrials. But for ancient humans, it was too novel and strange. This is also the explanation offered by proponents of the ancient astronaut theory. Moreover, Ezekiel described the landing of the chariot in great detail. During this event, storms, lightning, and bright lights were described in a way that closely resembles a modern spacecraft descending. Clearly, it was misunderstood, much like many technologies in the past. This is entirely understandable since people living on Earth thousands of years ago had no similar technology. Scientific thinking at the time was also different from today, but it cannot be ruled out that it was a supernatural phenomenon. Interestingly, Ezekiel described the energy fire of the chariot as resembling glowing metal. In the book, this passage is very clear. There came a tempestuous wind from the north. A great cloud enveloped in fire spread its brightness across the 4 directions. From within, it appeared something like shining metal emerging from the midst of the fire. As they moved, I heard the sound of their wings like the roar of mighty waters, like the voice of the Almighty. It was a thundering noise, like the sound of an army. When they stopped, they lowered their wings. Indeed, whether you hear it once or many times, you cannot deny that Ezekiel's descriptions sound very familiar to us. They are strikingly similar to the way we describe modern spacecraft as they launch and land on Earth. What Ezekiel called shining metal corresponds to the sparks or flames we often see when modern spacecraft take off. However, Ezekiel did not merely provide an astonishing description of the spacecraft. The ancient astronaut theorists also explain that when one looks at the living creatures, one sees wheels upon the ground beside each creature, each having 4 faces. This was the shape and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 wheels had the same appearance. They were constructed such that one wheel intersected another. When they moved, they could go in any of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were awesome, and all around the rims were filled with eyes. Over the heads of each creature was something like a dome, glittering like crystal. And it was marvelous. When the creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved as well. When the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also lifted off. Wherever the spirit desired to go, there they went. Was all of Ezekiel's description merely a story of a meeting between man and God, passed down to future generations? Was the wheel like a spacecraft only used to emphasize the holiness of God? From the perspective of modern science, the answer is certainly not. Yet all stories gradually fade in the flow of time as no conclusive evidence has been unearthed until recently. The Solar System Observatory on Earth, operated by NASA, captured a fleeting image of a structure resembling a wheel. The size of the object and its trajectory across the Sun led observers to conclude that the observatory had caught sight of an alien craft. Those who believe in extraterrestrial existence were thrilled, and many believe that the wheel has returned to visit our planet after thousands of years. However, not everyone agrees with this view. UFO researcher Scott Brandel argues that what people saw was, in fact, only a reflection. He claimed that it was a periodic visual artifact caused by internal reflection within a planet. NASA responded that the strangely shaped object was indeed an internal reflection of Venus within the optics of the telescope. This effect has been observed many times before. NASA's explanation, based on solid scientific grounds, completely dismissed and extinguished ideas related to a flying chariot appearing in the Bible from ancient times. However, there is still one thing that science has yet to explain: what Ezekiel actually saw. All his descriptions of the wheels used by God truly resemble a dream. Did Ezekiel really possess such a rich vocabulary and skillful descriptive ability that the images he witnessed appeared so mysterious to humans living thousands of years later? Could these images actually represent extraterrestrial visits in strange spacecraft? We may never find a definitive answer. If the wheels Ezekiel described were indeed ancient spacecraft, then all our assumptions about the distant past would need to be reconsidered in a very profound way. The mysteries of the magical Vimana chariot or Ezekiel's wheels are enough to convince modern humans of the argument that spacecraft really existed in ancient times. In the oral traditions passed down from antiquity, flying carpets were also mentioned quite frequently. Unlike the Vimana or Ezekiel's wheels, the flying carpet was not an overly large ancient spacecraft, but rather a familiar mode of transportation used by thieves or supernatural beings before the image of a flying broomstick appeared and replaced it. In the nightly dreams of children, flying carpets surely appeared countless times. The animated film Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, produced by Walt Disney in 1992, brought the image of the flying carpet to the entire world. Since then, flying carpets have become one of the most famous magical artifacts in the treasure trove of Eastern fairy tales. This magical object has strong connections with fantastical stories from the Middle East, but it is also mentioned in some legends of various civilizations throughout history. The film also led to a misconception, causing most people to believe that the flying carpet originated from the world of 1001 Nights. However, the facts about the flying carpet, as well as what modern humans understand about the Vimana and Ezekiel's wheels, are still very limited. Contrary to what most of us might think, the details of the flying carpet are quite vague in the original 1001 Nights. For example, in the manuscript of Antoine Galanda, first French translation in Europe from 1704 to 1717, considered the oldest manuscript containing 282 tales of 1001 Nights, there is no mention of a flying carpet. In the original tale of Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, the capture of Princess Bedroubadou and her bridegroom on their wedding night does not occur on a flying carpet but on their bridal bed, which the villain used magic to make fly. The magical flying carpet only appears for the first time in modern versions of 1001 Nights, specifically in Disney's 1992 animated film, Aladdin. It seems the studio added the flying carpet to make the fairy tale more exciting and dramatic. A mysterious, ancient scroll, however, suggests that the flying carpet, some tangible evidence of this long-standing legend, was discovered by a French explorer named Henry B. in Iran. According to Asian C.B., discovered carefully preserved scrolls in an underground vault of the ancient Assassin Castle in Alamut, near the Caspian Sea. These scrolls were written in the early 13th century by a Jewish scholar named Isaac ben Arira. It appears these manuscripts helped shed light on the true story behind the flying carpet, which seemed only to exist in the fairy tale world of 1001 Nights. As expected, the truth never remains dormant forever. With even a small disturbance, everything can become clear. The discovery of this artifact sparked one of the strongest debates ever seen in the scientific community. According to an English translation from French by Professor Septimus, a renowned linguist, a conference was quickly organized with the participation of famous scholars from around the world at the School of Eastern and African Studies. B's discovery was challenged by many historians who insisted that the manuscripts were forgeries. Meanwhile, Professor Septimus emphasized that these new findings needed careful study. The manuscripts are currently preserved at the Leonardo da Vinci Institute of Technology in the city of Chest, Italy. According to these ancient manuscripts, rulers of the Islamic world in the distant past believed that flying carpets were magical objects created by demons. Consequently, their existence was denied, their scientific significance suppressed, and even those who created them were persecuted. Any evidence related to them was systematically and thoroughly erased. According to Ben Arira's chronicles, the flying carpet was first mentioned in two texts, the first being a book of Proverbs, collected by Shamsata. The other manuscript is a book of ancient dialogues, compiled by Josephus. Unfortunately, none of these works have survived to the present day for verification. A closer examination of the 1001 Nights manuscripts suggests that King Solomon was the first historical figure associated with flying carpets. In the version of the story written by the Jewish scholar Ben Sira before the 8th century BCE, the queen in the legend had a capable assistant named Alchemist Kim, who was able to command a small carpet to hover and fly along a trajectory. One day, he presented the queen with a small brown carpet that could float just above the ground. The queen and her attendants were delighted with this invention. They wondered whether a person could sit on the carpet and requested that he continue improving this treasure. Many years later, Alchemist Kim succeeded in enabling a person to sit on it, and Queen Sba ordered him to create a flying carpet as a gift for King Solomon as a token of love.